I'm going to introduce you here to what is called the five-step problem solving plan. And anytime we've got a problem to solve, particularly a word problem like this, we use these five steps in order to solve it. Step number one is to analyze the problem. So let's go ahead and read it. It says in 1919, Britain and France offered a flight that carried two passengers at a time. Now there are more than 87,000 flights each day in the US. In how many days will 261,000 flights have occurred in the United States? So analyze means figure out what the problem is asking us to do. A lot of times, problems will give us some pretty unnecessary information, and this one is no different. This problem gives us a piece of information that, while very interesting, is useless to us, and that is in 1919, they gave us a flight that carried two passengers at a time. That is very cool. Thank you for that information problem, but I do not care. In analyzing the problem, I realized that the only two pieces of information that are relevant are how many flights there are each day, and then what the problem's asking me to do. How many days is it going to take me to get to 261,000 flights? Okay, that is the analyze part of my five-step plan. Now, step number two is formulate, and in this case, formulate means I need to write an equation. So let's get our equation here. And when I'm writing an equation, one of the things that I need to do is define my variables. And in this case, my variable is going to be the number of days. That's what it says in the problem. In how many days? In how many days will 261,000 flights happen? So I need to know the number of days, and I can use any symbol I want. So I'm going to use D for days. Number of days is going to be D. That'll be my variable. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and write our equation. It says there are 87,000 flights each day. So if I wanted to figure out the total number of flights over a period of days, I would just take 87,000 and I would multiply by the number of days. That would tell me how many flights happen for a certain number of days. In other words, if I wanted one day, I'd do 87,000 times one. That would tell me how many flights there were in one day. 87,000 times two would tell me how many flights there were in 2 days, and so on. And what I want to know is how long is it going to take in days for me to get to 261,000 flights? In other words, how many days do I multiply by for this to equal 261,000? That's what I need to know. There's my equation. Done. Step three, determine means what's the answer? How many days is it going to take? So let's just come over here to the side and do some math. So 87,000 times 1, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that's probably 87,000. So not that. What about 87,000 times 2? 87,000 times 2 is 174,000. That's not it. What about 87,000 times 3? And hey, what do you know? 87,000 times 3 is 261,000. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, I did that in a pretty dumb way. If you're like, hey, couldn't you have just done 261,000 divided by 87,000? Wouldn't that have been an easier way to do it? You are absolutely right. That would have been a much easier way to do it. We are coming up on that. I don't expect you to know how to do that just yet. If you already know how to do it, you are ahead of the game. That is determine. I have determined what the answer is. And I've already kind of done the next step, which is justify. Justify my answer means prove that my answer is correct. And I did that right here. By showing my work, I've killed two birds with one stone. I have justified my answer. If all I did over here was just say, oh, it's 3, I did it on the calculator, or I did it in my head, or I just divided, I have not justified my answer. But by showing my work right here, not only did I find the answer doing this, but by showing my work, I justified my answer. Okay, and then the last thing I want to do is evaluate. And when we say evaluate, what we mean is, does my answer make sense? Does this answer make sense? A lot of times we can do the math correctly or think we've done the math correctly, and we'll come up with an answer that mathematically we're like, nailed it, got it. But then whenever we stop and think about it, we'll realize our answer doesn't actually make sense in this problem. For example, what if I had come up with the answer -3 instead of 3? I might have completely convinced myself I did the math right, but -3 would not make sense. It would not make sense for me to have -3 days. But in this case, I think my answer does make sense. I think 3 days makes a lot of sense given the huge number of flights that we have every day. 87,000 flights a day. It's a little bit less than 100,000. So after 3 days, I've got a little bit less than 300,000. I think 3 days makes sense. So I like 3 days as my answer. After doing some evaluation on whether or not that answer makes sense, I think it does. So I'm happy with that answer. 3 days. So that's the 5-step problem solving plan. We analyze the problem, which means what is the problem actually asking me to do? Is there unnecessary information? Formulate means, in this case, it was write an equation, but formulate just means how am I going to find the answer? Determine means actually go find the answer. Justify means prove your answer. How do I know that this is the answer? Show me how you got the answer. And then evaluate means finally, does my answer make sense in the context of this problem?